Hi everyone, this is Miss S from Excelsior Charter School, and today we're going to be going over geometry, lesson 2-5, proving angles congruent. So we have several vocabulary words that we're going to need to go over today, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we are going to begin with postulate versus theorem. So we've already learned here in geometry that postulate is a statement that is accepted as true without any proof. It's like a scientific law. So now we're going to talk a different word today called a theorem. And a theorem is an important statement that must be proved before it can be accepted. So you're going to learn how to prove many different theorems in this class this year. And so that's what we're going to work on today, are some theorems. Our first theorem is the vertical angles theorem. And basically what it says is that vertical angles are congruent. So remember that vertical angles are not adjacent. They do, however, share a vertex. So in this particular image right here, the purple X's are vertical and the blue Y's are vertical. I imagine they're called vertical angles because they kind of make V's as opposed to whether or not they're actually vertical or horizontal. So this one here, the X one, is exactly the same as that one there, the X. And this one here, the Y, is exactly the same as this one here, the Y. So that is the vertical angles theorem. Most of your homework deals with vertical angles, so we're going to do one of those now. From the lesson, this is actually question 2, and it wants you to find the measure of the angles not labeled. So it's actually looking for this angle and this angle here. But in order to find those, we have to start with our vertical angles. So the best way to do this is to set them equal to each other. So because we know their vertical angles are congruent, 2x plus 3 would be equal to 4x minus 101. And we would solve this using algebra, just like we've done here, and we get that x equals 52. That is not what they're asking us for, though. Remember, in geometry, it's important to pay attention to what they're asking you for. So I'm going to take this 52, and you can plug it in for either x. I'll plug it in for this one here. And I have 2 times 52 instead of 2 times x plus 3. And then we just use arithmetic. And when we do, we will get that our vertical angles here are 107 degrees each. But remember, we aren't looking for the 2x plus 3 and the 4x minus 101. We're looking for the green ones, the ones that aren't labeled. So we need to remember that this one here, which we just found out to be 107, is supplementary to this one over here. They make a line. So that means that 180, which is the degrees in a line, minus the 107 that we know that one is, will give us our answer of 73. So the correct answer is 73. All right, so we're going to move on to different ways to prove things. We've already used several different proofs already in geometry. We used indirect proofs. Most of the time we're going to use 2-column proofs, which look something like this. They give you information up at the top and they tell you what you're trying to prove. And then you have 2 columns, one for your statements and one for your reasons. This is the one you'll use the most in geometry, but in some cases you might use a paragraph proof, which is a proof that's just written out in paragraph form. The statements and reasons are written in sentences, and you use words to explain the logical flow of the argument. So it's the same information that you would find in a 2-column proof, it's just written out like a paragraph. And our next one is the congruent supplements theorem, and it says that if 2 angles are supplementary to the same, then they are congruent to each other. So over here on the left, what we see is if angle 1 and angle 2 and angle 3 and angle 2 are supplementary, then angle 1 and angle 3 are congruent. So 1 is supplementary to 2 and 3 is supplementary to 2. So since they're both supplementary to the same angle, angles 1 and angle 3 must also be the same. So a way to kind of think of this is, let's say that angle 2 is 100 degrees. The only thing that can be supplementary to that is something that is 80 degrees. So whether it's angle 1 or whether it's angle 3, they must both be 80, so therefore they are both congruent. All right, our next one here is our congruent complements theorem. And it says that if two angles are complements of the same angle, then the two angles must be congruent. So very similar to the congruent supplements theorem, if these two here are linked together to be complements, and these two here are linked together to be complements, then 4 and 6 must be the same measure. So very similar to the congruent supplements theorem. And then our last two are right angle theorems. And the first one seems kind of self-explanatory, but right angles, are 90 degrees. And our first one says that all right angles are congruent. So all 90-degree angles are the same as all other 90-degree angles. They're all congruent. So here's a little diagram that kind of just shows us that. So pretty simple. And then here is our last one here. If two angles are congruent and supplementary, then each one has to be a right angle. So congruent meaning equal and supplementary meaning adds up to 180. So if you have two angles that add up to 180 and are congruent, they must each be 90 degrees. So then they have to be right angles. And those are all of our theorems, you guys. Good luck, everybody. I hope you guys do great.